I was off in Tanzania hiking Mount Kilimanjaro. I come back to the States, find out that a new executive order has hit dealing with college sports entitled Saving College Sports. Is it shenanigans or is some good stuff in here? Let's talk about what it says and do a little bit of analysis. So, what's true in the executive order? A couple things that it says that I think are just true. First, 75% of Olympians in 2024 were at some point collegiate athletes. And so they're concerned about what's happening in the Olympics. We won the Olympic Games, the overall medal count, I think for the last 8 years or the last 8 summer games. And so 75% of Olympians come through the college athletics pipeline. Okay? They're worried about that. Number 2, 30 states have passed their own NIL laws in a, quote, chaotic race to the bottom. I think that's true. Right? Every school is trying to get their institutions in their state an advantage, and because it's a race to the bottom, every time one state institutes some set of rules, another state comes back in and does something more. So, okay, 30 states have passed NIL laws, chaotic race to the bottom. I think that's true. Okay. The current system, according to the EO, creates an environment where teams can just buy the best players. So this is mostly true. Okay. However, under the previous system, you still had, now we have more parity in where players go because more schools are using dollars as incentives, as opposed to the prior system where culture and brand determined where student athletes went and not dollars. So the rubric around choosing has simply changed. Now, can teams buy the best players? Probably can. Okay. But you have more teams that can do that now, creating more parity in play as opposed to this concentration of schools that under the prior regime were able to dominate college athletics because they had other things culturally that were advantageous. Number 4, university donors must devote ever escalating resources to compete. That is true. So none of these, for the most part, these are not athlete-friendly points, except the first one that says all the Olympians, 75% of the Olympians have been previously college athletes in the summer games. Okay. Clearly, university donors have to donate ever-increasing resources to the collectives or through other mechanisms. Okay. So the EO says lots of things. I read it from top to bottom. You can read it yourself. Those are some of the things that I think are true in its kind of preamble to what it wants to do. So what's the proposed solution under the EO? First, increase scholarships up to the new roster limits. Okay. Expanding both non-revenue and women's sports. So that's what it says. Like, don't go the way you're going, where you're cutting these sports to fund the rev share. We expect you to not do that, but in fact, expand opportunities. Okay. Number 2, it says eliminate third-party pay for play unless it's a real branding opportunity. Now, third-party pay for play to me sounds like collectives. And there's been tons of energy around not the elimination of collectives, but the collectives being in the position to pay above the rev share cap dollars to athletes. So the notion of shutting that down, we'll see. Okay. So that's number 1, increase scholarship limits to non-revenue women's sports. Number 2, eliminate third-party pay for play. To me, sounds like collectives. Number 3, athletic departments with $125 million in revenue, which is roughly 40 schools, okay, should provide more non-revenue scholarship opportunities than they did last year. So no cutting programs, 40 schools, do more, not less. Okay. Now, that's 40 schools. In Power 4, there are 70 schools. Okay, so this deals with a fraction of them. Now, for athletic departments with at least $50 million in revenue, I was not able to get any count whatsoever on how many schools that actually was. Okay, but they should hold firm on what they did last year. So no cutting programs to fund the rev share. You got to keep doing what you were doing in addition to funding the rev share. 50 million and up. Okay. If the institution's athletic department revenue is less than 50 million, which is the lion's share of institutions by far, okay, then they should not disproportionately reduce scholarships based on the revenue associated with the sports. Okay? And finally, number 6, the rev share should be implemented in a way that preserves or expands scholarships in women's and non-revenue sports. So that one I find really interesting. I'll tell you why in just a second. Okay, so now, how's any of this supposed to happen? Secretary of Education, Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Attorney General, and the Federal Trade Commission Chair have 30 days from the date of the executive order, which I believe was June 24th, okay, to develop a plan using carrots and sticks to implement the executive order. Because the question on the table is, how is any of this supposed to work in practice? Okay, so they got 30 days. Now, the other thing is, because they're concerned about all the lawsuits under this executive order that have driven us to this place, okay, the Attorney General and the FTC chair will protect college athletic departments from lawsuits by, drumroll please, bringing more lawsuits. That's right. If you sue, we're going to sue. We're going to use all the tools available to us as the federal government to prevent individuals from bringing lawsuits against athletic departments and institutions. Okay. So that's the plan. Okay. That's what the executive order says. It says some other things, but those are the key features we should be concerned about. So what's the problem with all this? First, the focus is on top line revenue with respect to expanding scholarships, or at least not reducing them, right? Top line revenue is not the factor. You need to understand what the bottom line revenue is after expenses are paid in order to figure out how you can fund additional things. Now, keep in mind, most athletic departments, at least in my research in the past several months, were looking to reduce expenses by 10% in order to free up money for that rev share, because that rev share money has to come from someplace. Right? So they've been doing staff reductions and all sorts of things to reduce expenses in the enterprise to create more bottom line revenue, free cash. So the notion of focusing on top line revenue doesn't recognize that it's a math problem that's not being solved properly. So that the first thing is the math problem. Okay. What's the second thing? The second thing is that, I just mentioned a few minutes ago, this same administration back in January shelved a rule that had been put in place by the Department of Education under Title IX on the previous administration that said that the dollars associated with the rev share needed to be equitably distributed between men and women's sports. And so this administration shelved that rule. And so now they're advocating that the rev share be used to protect Olympic and women's sports, which is completely contrary to the notion that the rev share will be paid to sports that generate revenue. So the ecosystem as it exists and what's being set forth in this order are inconsistent. Okay. I already mentioned that institutions have been looking at ways to spend above the cap. And so the notion that third-party payments are not permissible is going to be a huge issue. I'm longing to see what the reaction is to how that will be implemented once this 30 days passes. Okay. It's not clear to me that student athletes are any better off under this executive order that saves college sports. Certainly the ecosystem, the institutions, the structure around college sports, this tries to address some all that. But are athletes better off? Are there actually more scholarships available for athletes? Okay. Are athletes that have the benefit to participate in NIL via either true branding deals or with third parties or collectives, are they going to get what they should be entitled to? Are they going to get crammed down? I don't know if athletes are any better off. Okay. And query, I really think that the system is sufficiently out of control that it's unclear whether any of this will help. We got 30 days to wait and see what happens. As always, I welcome your thoughts. That's what the EO says. That's what I think about it. Let me know.